Hi, everybody. It's Andrea Paquette, president and co-founder of Stigma-Free Mental Health Society. I am super excited today to welcome you to Stigma-Free Voices, where we talk to guests from around the globe. And today we are speaking with Lauren. And Lauren, do you want to say a quick hello and maybe share where you're tuning in from?
Sure. Hey, everyone. So my home office is in southwestern Ontario. I'm about 2.5 hours from Toronto, down near Brigden. If you've ever never been to the Brigden Fair, it's worth the trip. There you go. That's my little shameless plug for my hometown.
I'm so coming now. I love it.
Okay.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about farmers' mental health, agricultural. At Stigma-Free Voices, we have our general stigma-free guests sharing their lived experience, professionals in the field of mental health, but also we love to focus on the rural community and the agricultural community, especially with our Rural Minds Matter peer support training and the work that we do. So we connected with Lauren, and I thought, what a good way to start than to share a little bit about her. So sound good, Lauren?
Absolutely.
All right. So Lauren is it Van Eek? How do you pronounce your last name?
Well, it depends on who you're speaking with. If it was my mother-in-law, she would say Van Ewyk. If it was my husband's auntie, it would say Van Ewyk. But my husband and I pronounce it Van Ewyk. So just think Van and then go Ewyk like that.
I love it.
That's how we pronounce it.
Nice. Okay. Lauren Van Ewyk is the CEO and co-founder of the National Farmer Mental Health Alliance. She is also an engaging speaker, as you can tell already, registered social worker, foster mom, and agricultural mental health advocate, which we're going to dig into today. And I'm very interested to learn more. She has appeared in numerous radio, television, and print articles concerning the issues of mental wellness and mental health in the agricultural sector. Lauren and her husband raise sheep, I love that, in southwestern Ontario and are the owners of Cedarview Farm Store and Bakery. She is a PhD student at the University of Guelph in the School of Environmental Design and Rural Development. As a founding member and CEO of the National Farmer Mental Health Alliance and owner of Wellspring Counselling Services, Lauren is passionate about equipping producers to lead well, dream big, and strategically place themselves in line for success. Awesome. I'm so impressed by your bio. I'm so happy to have you here today.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't we just jump right in and talk about the National Farmers Mental Health Alliance? And can you tell me a little bit about your journey in co-founding that and maybe what gaps you sought to fill with this organization?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've had the privilege of walking alongside farmers for a long time. I grew up on a small little hobby farm. I'm going to call it a hobby farm. It was more than a hobby, but for me, it was a great foundation. I loved raising lambs and caring for them. But then when I became a mental health practitioner or a psychotherapist, some people call social worker, counselor, when I earned that title, what I found was there's this great gap in servicing the rural community. There's numerous barriers for rural communities. In fact, what we know is living in a rural community is actually a determinant of health. We face more, chronic stress. There's a number of other pieces that fit our kind of portfolio or our presentation. And so I had a couple of clients who came to me. One was a gentleman who was losing his 5th generation farm and had gone to see a therapist. And the therapist said to him, it's really not that big a deal. Just save up your money and buy another farm. Like, they didn't get the concept of losing a 5th generation farm, which is very significant. And then I had another young gal, and she had come looking for counseling because it was just her and her dad. And from a very young age, they had structured the takeover of the farm, the succession of the farm around this particular genetic lineage, and all these pieces. And then when she got to her grade 12 year, she actually decided she wanted to become a veterinarian. Her school counselor was like, "That's fantastic. Your dad will love that. And Dad didn't love that. Obviously, it produced some really significant strife in the relationship. And so I was chatting with Carrie Pollard. Carrie is our other co-founder. She actually sought me out. She called me one time and we had a really good chat. And we just both clicked so in tunely. It was like we were, riding a double bicycle together because we both had the same passion and the same vision. And so from there, we started creating the material that we knew rural practitioners needed in order to help farmers thrive. And of course, it's all research-based, it's evidence-based. We have a number of researchers that we've partnered with to develop it. So that was the birth of the National Farmer Mental Health Alliance a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and a gap there because traditional therapists, as you say, may not just understand the issues that farmers face, that producers face, right? And losing that fifth generation farm, that is serious. And that is quite, trauma inducing for people who have to go through such things.
It certainly can be. And, all the research points to it. Caitlin Viro out of Australia, she did some really excellent research. And there's a number of other individuals that we've worked with. And what we find is farmers are not really likely to reach out for support. But when they do, if they're met with someone who doesn't understand agriculture, if they end up spending that whole hour educating the therapist on what the difference is between a sow and a boar, or, like all of the, whether or not you're a crop producer and what swathing is, all of those pieces, the farmer walks away feeling not just like invalidated because they came looking for support and ended up providing an education system, but they actually feel like a sense of betrayal almost. And then there's also some preconceived notions about what farmers think professionals think about them and what professionals actually think about them. But it is fascinating because I was just chatting with a lady at Columbia State University, and she was like, oh my goodness, I've never thought about, we were chatting about grief in rural areas because as farmers, we actually experience a lot of grief. And, we have some trauma that it goes along, both generational and episodic, meaning an event that happens. And so, a number of individuals, both in the professional realm, and then, and not to say farmers aren't professional, because we certainly have farmers are professionals and experts in what they do. But from a therapeutic perspective, it's really been a bit of a wake-up call for people to recognize the unique issues that farmers face.
Wow, so needed. And definitely, yeah, there's definitely a gap there for sure. So what you're doing is so important.
Thank you.
So when it comes to something you've spoke about in recent months, coerced resilience, could you explain for our listeners what that is and why it's relevant to the agricultural community?
So I am absolutely fascinated with this topic. So you might have to pull me back in here, Andrea, if I go too far off on a little bit of a rabbit trail. But I'm sure everyone has heard the term resilience. And in fact, some of the definitions of resilience include to bounce back quickly, right? Or to reshape, to take on the original shape as resilience. And I say hogwash. That is not resilience. What I see and what we have seen in the agriculture community is we see what we call coerced resilience. And coerced resilience is where it's a kind of failed adaptation where we force ourselves to keep going. We force ourselves to get the job done. We force ourselves to to fix something, but it doesn't mean that we're actually being resilient. We're kind of holding on to the stress, or we're functioning, but it's not thriving.
Right.
And so there's coerced resilience where we kind of force ourselves, and we see this in farmers all the time because they face a long period of chronic stress, and then we tend to see a quick flip is what we actually see in farmers. And so to the rest of the world, we're like, wow, like we thought they had it all together, everything was going well. That's coerced resilience for a long period of time. We personify that we're doing really well, and then at some point somebody kicks the legs out from under the chair and it just implodes. That's kind of strong language, but it just gets to the place where it's like it is not working for us any longer. And so that's coerced resilience. Now the flip side, the kind of antithesis of coerced resilience, is authentic resilience. And authentic resilience looks very different than coerced. Authentic resilience looks like we access supports, We are honest with other people when we're experiencing difficulty. We build new skills, we learn new skills. And so that's authentic resilience. Even though we face hard things, we positively adapt to them through developing new skills and all of the other pieces of that puzzle.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting because I think sometimes, yeah, farmers have this image of keeping it all together, be stoic, and this runs into our next question around how do the cultural values of strength, stoicism, and independence both protect and unintentionally harm our experience of wellness in agriculture?
Yeah, I love this question because I think it's really easy to paint a broad stroke, and it's really easy for us to say, oh, this is right and this is wrong. And that's just not the case. I mean, when we think about stoicism or we think about resilience, even coerced resilience, there are times where using coerced resilience or using those qualities get us through. When I think about my husband's grandparents, when they came to Canada, there wasn't a lot of like, let's sit down and talk about how you feel. There was we've got to keep food on the table. And so we're going to keep going. So it has served us. There are times where I see farmers, like it's fascinating to me when farmers are faced with a significant trial. We've had a barn fire, or we've had, a natural disaster. And many people looking from the outside in would not think that they had faced something so difficult because they are able to continue. I mean, farmers for all of history have continued. We are a resilient people, like we are resilient. But in so doing, if we depend on that stoicism for so long that we don't bring in the aspect of authenticity and the aspect of this is really hard, and I need to talk to somebody about how hard this is, or I need to get some support, or I need to go to some sort of a group. If we kind of miss out on that piece, then we produce that long-standing coerced resilience. And there's 4 different phases that we adapted for burnout or for resilience kind of overload, coerced resilience. And the first one is a person who's a zealot, meaning I can do it all, I can get it done. That's actually the first sign of burnout. And then it goes through, a form of withdrawal, goes through a form of irritability. But the last one we call is the zombie phase. And that's where farmers just get the job done, right? Like they just persevere, they just get the job done. Oftentimes you'll see these people say, I can't ask for help. Nobody can do it the way I do it. It has to be me. And that is this really significant form of the stoicism that you talked about, or that sense of resilience. But again, it leads to, can I say, the dark side of resilience, or it leads to the unhealthful form of resilience, that coerced version.
Right. And then I think a lot of self-stigma could come out of that as well. Why aren't I doing enough? What is wrong with me? That shame kind of thing. And I was also going to talk to you about, from your experience, would you say stigma in rural communities is pervasive? Like thinking about, there's that internal stigma too, but then the external. So what do you think about that?
Those different forms of stigma actually interlace with one another, which is quite fascinating. Would I say that stigma is more pervasive? I think it is, but part of it is because of the language that we use around it. So yes, I would say that it is more pervasive, not because, and that's changing. I also want to say because of organizations like Stigma-Free Society, that's changing. I see a lot more individuals willing to say, you know what, like I'm concerned about my friend's mental health. I'm concerned about my brother. I'm concerned about my sister. And so we do see that changing. But when you talk about kind of that internal kind of stigmatization, a lot of that centers around this knowledge of what we call unhelpful guilt. And this is something that farmers really do struggle with. We have a sense of loyalty. We have traditionalism in some of our rural communities. We have a sense of loyalty. And so when it comes to kind of understanding how we grew up and how we functioned and how we came to be the people we are, we have a really hard time looking at that and just saying, are there things that could have been done differently? Unhelpful guilt is one of those things. As farmers, we use unhelpful guilt to motivate us. So unhelpful guilt starts as young as 3 to 6 years of age, usually because of an adult in our lives that we sought to please. It doesn't have to be a parent. Could have been a teacher, could have been a coach, could have been, and we want to please them. And so we strive really hard. Well, when we feel, not that they've said this, but we've set these unrealistic expectations, we feel we don't meet those expectations, we then introduce this anxiety, right? This worry. And so then we strive harder and harder. And we actually use worry and anxiety to our benefit in an effort to meet these unrealistic expectations. And what we find when we get to our 20s and our 30s and our 40s, we go, oh, that's it. I give up. I can't. I've tried to meet those expectations, and no matter what I do, I can't. And so that's kind of that internal stigma. It's actually sourced in unhelpful guilt, where we're trying to please someone. And so this would be my kind of my helpful spot, or my encouragement to people who are listening is, unrealistic expectations are unrealistic. They're not actually meant to guide your life. You can change that. You can start to say, okay, wait a minute, I did this really well. And that's one of the things we see in agriculture communities all over.
Right. And then using that point of view with your clients, right? And just ensuring that maybe some of these ways of being or their own point of view is really laced with that wanting to please all the time. And that can be extremely stressful for anybody.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about structural and systemic barriers. We talked about some of the individual, and I was wondering what are the most significant structural and systemic barriers that farmers face when trying to access mental health services, as an example?
Well, that's a really great question. It's interesting because we certainly have tried to, post-COVID, open up the idea of having telehealth medicine practices, which is great, except for in a lot of rural communities, we still don't have internet services to the degree that we need to. And so we have specific structural barriers, internet access. We live a distance from an office space. We also don't want people to see our vehicles parked outside the counseling office due to stigma, as you mentioned. And so those are specific structural barriers. One of the other pieces that, if this would be the kind of rabbit hole that I like to go down, is our rural policy. We really lack a national, federal, and individual provincial policy development strategies that are rural focused. Up to 30% of Canadians live in rural and remote areas. And yet, very few policies that are developed with those rural populations in mind. So certainly that would be a piece as well. When we think about structural barriers, though, we're really looking at the infrastructure. Some of the other barriers that we have, besides the internal and the stigma, is the systemic pieces. So, for instance, our rural kids are 4 to 6 times more likely to die by suicide than urban kids. When our rural kids, or when rural individuals are admitted to hospital, they're more likely to be released early, and they're more likely to be readmitted. And so part of the way our health structure works is not working for the individual. And even today, I was at the hospital. I saw a young man. He had 2 police escorting him, which means he would have been probably a jailed individual, this young fella under the age of 18. And so I couldn't help but chat with one of the leads there on the team at the hospital. And she said, well, mental health is still a thing. And she's like, and I'm like, yes, it is. And so I don't know that individual story. I don't know anything about what's going on in that individual's life. But what I can say is, because we have neglected some of the wellness strategies, we set ourselves up for meeting for those structural barriers. And so those are also ongoing concerns.
Yeah, a lot of work to do for sure. And mental health certainly is a thing. And I think it always has been, but perhaps now it's talked about, I think, a lot more than it used to be, especially as, like you were mentioning, the pandemic. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then, we were just talking about agricultural informed therapy training. If you could tell me more about that, I'm very fascinated. And why this sector specific training is important. Do you have anything more to add on to that piece there?
Well, our agriculture informed therapy is kind of our flagship product, and it's 12 continuing credit hours. It's approved by the Canadian Counselling and Psychotherapy Association. So, but it's interesting because it's not just for therapists. If you're a nurse, if you are, a recreational therapist, if you work in agriculture, we've had numerous people take this training and love it. And this training is really designed to tackle the hard things. We talk about substance use in agriculture and intimate partner violence. We talk about the multi-generational layers. We talk about women's experience in agriculture. We also talk about social justice and food justice and how synonymous those two are. And so this training, of course, we're really passionate about it. The very base of it, it talks about the issues farmers face and what we can do to support the agriculture community. And so that training specifically is for those who are engaged in the agriculture community and want to support those in agriculture. We do have a number of other programs. One would be our Rural Watch program. And that's a hands-on training program for stakeholders in the agriculture community. And so, we've done that training with different kind of corporations who work in agriculture. We also have a grief after suicide support group. And that support group runs actually starting March and April, and once a week for individuals who have been impacted by suicide. And so all of those different programs come together in an effort to really support rural needs, and we're really excited for that. We've had well over 150 therapists take the training.
Wow.
And the feedback has been extraordinary. People are just, although some people have said, well, this is the most intense training I've ever been at, right? Because it's hard stuff and stuff that lots of people had no idea about.
Yeah. Well, what is the most important thing? Say if a clinician, policymaker, educator, or somebody who works in the rural community with farmers or in this field, what's like one of the most important things you would say they need to understand about farm life before they offer support, like, through this training?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think it's really important for us to understand the issues farmers face. By and large, the majority of communities don't understand the fact that we are land rich, cash poor. We don't have a lot of free flow income. Typically, we don't have a lot of health benefits. So those are some of certainly the issues farmers face, the barriers, as we talked about. One of the other pieces that we experience is succession planning. I'm sure you've talked about succession planning and the work that you've done too, Andrea. And so that piece is really important because there's a huge turnover in farms that are transitioning from one generation to the other. Our average farm age in Canada is somewhere around 57, 58 years of age. That's the average age of a farmer. And so those are some of the really important pieces of the training.
Yeah, no, vital and unique, right? And I think having people understand those types of issues is vital, especially in agricultural communities. Like, it's just perhaps something a lot of people haven't even thought about.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So I know you touched on, oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say the other really key piece, and I don't want to leave this off, is whether you're a professional or not, understand the expert in your midst. I mean, our farmers are really in tune with the land and the soil. They're conservationists. They are really wise people. And so I think that would be my other message to people who are professionals working in agriculture, is to understand the expert in your midst, because they deserve to be appreciated for what they bring to the story.
100%. That lived experience piece at Stigma-Free Mental Health Society, as an example, we don't create our programs without people with that lived experience and valuing what they've been through, right? So I think this is very similar. So you mentioned a few of your programs. Are there any new projects on the horizon?
Oh, projects. I love projects. But the one that I'm most excited about, and this is credits to Agri-Food Canada, because we were one of the recipients, like Stigma-Free Society. So one of the things that we're working on is we're building an app for farmers and for allied health professionals to use. So that's very exciting. If people can stay tuned. We're looking for people who will trial out that. And sometimes I think when people hear the word app, they think, oh, it's more technology. Well, there's a lot of really unique aspects to it. So we're quite excited about it. We are excited to work with some new partners in the field and support the work that they are doing as well. I will be speaking at the Advancing Women in Agriculture conference, which is coming up. You can still get tickets. So if anyone wants to fly out to Calgary, it's actually a pretty cheap flight. Pretty reasonable across Canada. And of course, if you're in the Alberta area, come to Advancing Women in Agriculture conference. It is a riot and we learn so much from one another. I'll be speaking to a couple of the business organizations as well on leadership and how to lead well in a very challenging time in leadership. So there's always something on the go. What I would encourage is for people to sign up for our newsletter. It doesn't come out nearly as often as the Stigma-Free newsletter, which I love. I think that's one thing, Andrea, that you do so well. But it is a way that you can stay connected with us. So we appreciate that so much.
Okay, perfect. And so I was curious, as a closing question, what gives you hope for the future of agriculture? Where do you see progress here?
Wow, I see it in organizations like Stigma-Free Society, and their willingness and other organizations' willingness to share or to kind of come alongside one another, because ultimately, as farmers need to know, there's lots of people in this industry that care about their wellness, and rural individuals. We care about our rural communities. And I'm hopeful because I do see the tide is changing and has changed. I see more people willing to reach out. I see more people willing to to learn the skills, to have the hard conversations. And so even though there still is a hill to climb, like there still is a lot of work to be done, there has been a real shift and change. We work with Three Oaks Respite Cabin, for those of you who are tuning in from southwestern Ontario. It's a cabin for first responders and farmers to come, and they can stay for free. They receive some of our mental health kind of training if they're interested. And so I see initiatives like that one changing the trajectory for this very grassroots, very hands-on population.
Amazing.
And I am too a farmer, so I kind of benefit in so many multiple ways, which I appreciate.
Great. And you bring that lived experience into your work, which is just so valuable, right? So you've lived it, you're living it, and you know it. So I feel like that even brings more credibility to your work and to the Alliance as well.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Our therapists are master's level trained, and they have lived agriculture experience in the vast majority, meaning many of us are farmers and therapists.
Yeah, it's amazing. So where can people find you and your organization? Where can they find you?
Yeah, find us at www.nfmha.ca. So that stands for National Farmer Mental Health Alliance.ca. We have a 1-800 number. You're welcome to reach out to us. Definitely follow us on Facebook and on Instagram, LinkedIn. Those are really great opportunities to catch up. We have a great blog every month and things like that, just to encourage you and to let you know that you're not alone in this journey. And we want to come alongside you in whatever way possible.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lauren. I hope you have a good day. Just stay on for a moment. And yeah, very meaningful conversation. I think people will learn a lot. And just wanted to say to everybody who is watching, if you're watching this after the fact on Facebook Live, and then you see it afterwards, on YouTube or wherever you do see us, Spotify as well, please do share. We really like to get the message out there about awareness, understanding, and the acceptance of mental health. At Stigma-Free Mental Health Society, we have our Rural Minds Matter program, where we have a toolkit, and we also conduct peer support training. We're doing one in Manitoba coming up in person. We just finished one here virtual in January, and much more to come. So people can create community groups, neighbors supporting neighbors, and making this very meaningful and to help as many people as possible. All right. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate you. Thank you for being part of the Stigma-Free community. And I hope that you have a lovely rest of your week. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.